Good morning, everyone. Please, we're gathering our panelists, so please bear with us. But in the meantime, make yourselves comfortable. I think everyone knows how to use headphones by now. It's a great system. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, please. I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning to this panel on transboundary climate adaptation and mitigation risks in Africa, perspectives and regional cooperation. As a technical reminder, please everyone, this is being live streamed and this is being recorded, so please be aware, and everyone knows how to use the headsets and knows to put them back on the chair at the end of the session, please. Over the last many years, we've often looked at climate change adaptation as something that happens locally, that this is a very place-based process of changing technical practices, changing social organization, changing knowledge in response to climate stresses. Well, this is still true. It's not the entire story. We've become increasingly aware that climate change adaptation, while it does occur locally, there are certain pathways of climate change adaptation and indeed mitigation, impacts and responses that surpass local boundaries, that happen across localities, sometimes across countries. We have labeled these transboundary climate adaptation risks. For example, it was in 2017 or so, there was a drought in the Horn of Africa, especially in Somalia. My own institute, ILRI, had done some research there, finding that the drought impact was bad. But what made it even worse was the fact that there was a trade ban across the Red Sea. So there's a war in Yemen, there was trade limitations going to the Saudi Peninsula, and that compounded the drought and the impacts of the drought itself. So it wasn't uniquely drought, it surpassed the boundaries. So today we're going to explore transboundary climate risks, getting many perspectives on how those can fit into nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plans, how those can present themselves and be addressed in regional planning. So by way of process, I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the initial research that we had done on transboundary climate adaptation risks in Africa, just to set the scene and get the concept out. It's not always the easiest to get our heads around. Then we will introduce our panel. We'll go through a number of discussion topics, and then we will then switch gears to a second panel to get more at first we're starting with the national perspectives, and then we're going into regional perspectives. So like I said, transboundary climate risks are the elements of climate change that don't just impact and don't merit just local responses, where the responses and the impacts transcend national boundaries or even regional boundaries. ILRI, along my own institute, I'm from the International Livestock Research Institute, along with ODI, the African Group of Negotiators ENDA Expert Support, and ENDA Energie are all part of the Adaptation Without Borders network. A few years ago, we collectively did a scoping research on what are the issues related to transboundary climate adaptation risks in Africa. Starting with some of the conceptual and pathways and mechanisms of impact, and then getting to stakeholders' perceptions of how those materially and practically play out in their particular contexts. How do climate change impacts and responses play out across multiple boundaries? They can be triggered by any number of different mechanisms. The shock, the rapid onset event is kind of the classic example. This can be a drought or flood. This triggers movements of people, movements of goods, and changing patterns of behavior and practice that can ripple across boundaries. But the slow onset is also another trigger. The gradual change of environment over time, the gradual change of socioeconomic pressures over time can trigger the change in the impact of how a climate shock plays out, or a climate change plays out across boundaries. Another trigger, potential trigger, can be adaptation actions themselves, because every action has knock-on effects. An action in one location to try and address and improve climate change adaptation can have negative effects downstream. This can often be seen in the case of water management. Creating dams here changes the flow down there. So again, these are all mechanisms by which climate change adaptation can, and climate change impacts can move across boundaries. They can spread directly in terms of the movement of people, or the ceasing of movement of goods. They can cascade in terms of a series of knock-on effects that are indirect, or they can spread through sort of a contagion, a dynamic where something that occurs in one locality can then spread in multiple directions simultaneously. We sometimes can see this in terms of conflict dynamics, where a small conflict can spread into a larger, potentially cross-boundary or regional conflicts. In 2021, this consortium of organizations conducted research with a variety of African political stakeholders to get a handle on people's perception of the likelihood and severity of transboundary climate impacts, to see what are the issues that people think are most likely to be seen. We asked people to rate these in terms of likelihood and severity, though we saw a fairly strong correlation between both of those factors. The number one ranked transboundary climate impact was seen in terms of livestock or crop diseases that may be triggered by climate effects. Then, of course, in the livestock case, livestock themselves can move and disease patterns might spread. In crops, crops don't move, but the diseases can spread accordingly and have knock-on effects that transcend national boundaries. The second ranked factor was insecurity. We see insecurity in a small locality that then may spread across boundaries as potentially conflict dynamics, or human movement away from insecurity crosses boundaries. And similarly, regional displacement. Interestingly, we also found that food chain disruptions were seen as a significant transboundary climate risks, where climate may impact food production in one area, and they choose to, if the maize harvest is low in one country, they may choose to cease exporting, which creates an impact in neighboring countries which may rely on those imports. So again, the mechanisms are sometimes material, they're sometimes environmental, they're sometimes economic. So based on this overview, I'd like to introduce our first round of panelists to discuss how they see transboundary climate risks in their context. I would like to give a brief introduction of our first three panelists. First, we have Dr. David Awolala. He works at the intersection of climate research, policy, and practice with the African Group of Negotiators Expert Support, with a focus on climate risk assessment and resilience in agriculture, water, and land use. Next is Idi Nyang, the head of regional division for Senegal's Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development, who supports Senegal's negotiations. And finally, we have Sena Aluka, who serves as the CAN International Energy Working Group facilitator and sits on the board of various international organizations. After several years of service to the Togo delegation, he's been appointed by the Togo government as a country negotiator on agriculture. So I thank you all for joining us this morning. What I would like you each to start with is a few comments on how you see the transboundary climate risks being relevant to your countries. We have Senegal, we have Togo, and David representing East Africa here. So please, David, go ahead and start.
Thank you, Todd, for inviting me to join this session. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Issues of transboundary risk has been introduced properly by Todd, but I just want to give in some reflections from our experiences from Eastern Africa. Issues of climate change and environmental degradation is huge across countries that share border lines, and especially that share some natural resources like maybe water, because water is used for domestic purposes, but also for agricultural purposes, and hydropower production. One typical example that we have from Eastern Africa is the conflict around River Nile, which is being shared by Ethiopia and Egypt. If you remember, there was a time that the River Nile is critical for food production in Egypt because they channel the water to provide irrigation supplies. But at some point, Ethiopia said they want to provide some dams. They want to dam the water and convert it for hydropower supply production. And so it raises huge concern and a lot of conflicts between the two countries. It led to so many conflicts and a lot of regional imbalances in that region. Also, we have River Zambezi, which share border lines with Uganda, we have Zambia and Zimbabwe. And oftentimes, it leads to conflict too, because when a country is trying to create some resources or a kind of creating a venue for pasture management and forages, for example, you see the pastoralists from the other side, for example, usually from Uganda, move with their cattle and come here to come and graze, which is a kind of maladaptation. So issues of transboundary risk is really important, it's critical for infrastructure development and also for peace and transboundary resilience. So these are few triggers that we have from Eastern Africa. Of course, we have the Karamoja cluster where we have Uganda, we have Southern Guinea, we have Ethiopia, the region that we call the Horn of Africa. Issues of food insecurity and transmigration is huge because of conflicts. And of course, you see South Sudan and Sudan in terms of wars, crises that has led to so many humanitarian crises as of now. Many people have been displaced in millions, and livelihood have been lost. And so this shows that it is important at this time that as Africa, we start to look inward to see why planning national adaptation plans, NDCs, issues of transboundary risk need to be holistically looked at regional level.
So, thank you. Good morning. My name is Idi Nyang. I'm from Senegal. So, working at the Ministry of Environment and Ecological Transition. So, I'm in the negotiation process since 2007. I was firstly negotiating on mitigation and then adaptation, and now I'm in loss and damage. I'm a member of the advisory board of the Santiago Network. So, I'm in the process since such a bit long time. So on that matter, with regard to transboundary, so we just need to first to see, have a look first how the borders was drawn when we was under colonization. So you can see saying one community divided by a virtual line that even if you come to Senegal, for example, you will see people from the Gambia and the Senegal that are the same community. They have the same practices, from customs, and then one day you come say that this is the borders. And people can live in the Gambia and have their farmers to farm in Senegal. So that is the first problem that we need maybe to are facing. We are facing. So what is most important is maybe to look the internal displacement. So that is with pastoralists. We used to have many conflict from coming from that with pastoralists and farmers, because the north of the country, the region of Matam, Luga, there are many pastoralists there, and when it comes the beginning of the dry season, they are moving from the north to the center and the south of the country with all the petals, and there are many conflicts on that. We have the regional and local governments who create many committees of this kind to see how we can take care of this matter to evitate all this conflict coming from this. This is the first point. And secondly, we are sharing many rivers in Senegal. This is the Senegal River. We have also the Gambian River, and many lakes and other water point where we can maybe have farmers coming from Mauritania, from Mali, and from the Gambia sharing these rivers and having an exploitation of this river. So Senegal and Mauritania in the years 1980, so we had a conflict on that because we wanted to rehabilitate the fossil valley, and then this created a problem because Mauritania doesn't want any exploitation before the country of the river. So we create the organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Sénégal, and we have all the countries who are around the river, who have border with the river, have this organization for a common exploitation. So we have a hydro power plant in, and then we also have a chart of the exploitation of the river. And also we have also another organization with the Gambian river, with Senegal and Gambia, and now I think Guinea is asking to join, and we have many also asking. That this is very critical, and we need to see at the sub-regional, bilateral between two countries, and also at the national level how to hand over and to try to find solution to evitate conflict first at the national level between farmers and pastoralists, and also between countries. So this is an issue which is created first by the artificial borders, line that we say that has borders, and also the exploitation of the river that we have in common. I think that is a very critical issue with regard to adaptation, because if you are living in the Gambia and you have your farm in Senegal, and also that is the same with Mali and Senegal, that's the same community. They're having the same language, same food, same tradition. It's not, we cannot come and that you need to stay in the other part of the border, which is not concrete and realistic. If you want to adapt correctly with regard to climate change events and adverse effect. So that's why I think I'm just giving this picture, and then maybe I will come back with regard to recommendation and solution.
Thank you. I think the the picture that he just presented is very similar to what we have. But very interesting fact from where I come from. So my country is Togo, and our history is that French and English decided to share some land in Africa. So British asked to take some part of Nigeria back from Cameroon, and so they had to give some part of Togo to the British, and Togo was divided in two. And just one morning, half of Togolese found themselves becoming Ghana population. And the good thing is, apart from Kinshasa, Brazzaville, that's divided by the river, Lomé, the capital city, is the only capital in Africa that is at the border. You just move from the capital city and then you are in Ghana. So you can imagine from trade, health, and all the other risks are there. Like we're living with that almost every day. In COVID time, it was clear the border was closed, nothing could go in, nothing can come in, and the main capital city is living at the heart of transboundary climate risk almost every day. We feel it. And apart from that, going in the same sense like issues that they had also in Senegal, at some point, Volta River, today we have the Volta River Authority. So Volta River used to be fully in Togo, but now it's in Ghana. So they decided to exploit it and build a dam. Volta River was the main drawer of sand to the sea. You know, the sea, for its function, needs some sand every day. Now they build a dam, and the dam block the input of sand to the sea. And the sea is obliged to come and take sand from the Togo side. At some point, we're losing about from 1 to 10 meters every year. So the first two routes, between Lomé and Cotonou, if you're going to Benin, the first two routes are in the water now. Communities, cemeteries, wells, everything, hotels are now in the sea. You can see it every day. So we are now using the third route from Lomé. So we don't know how this will happen, mostly because of the Akosobo Dam in Ghana. And third aspect that we live in is the transhumance. So most are pastoralists coming from Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso with their cattle, doing business up to the capital city. And that caused a lot of troubles on the way. We all know all the risks associated with transhumance on the continent. But we are facing it on a very, very dire situation as well. And of course, when you mention the geopolitical aspect as also, you know, I like the 5 risks that colleagues try to identify: geopolitical, trade, etc. I think in the context of Togo, where I see it becoming very serious, is we can't, you know, the whole aspect of terrorism, radicalism ongoing right now in the Sahel and coming down to the north part of Togo. And we are using a lot of our money trying to fight. But what is this happening in the water stress area, the area which are arid, where adaptation is very hard, communities are already suffering. So you add another layer of radicalism, terrorism. That also is an issue we need to look at. So yeah, that's just to draw the picture of where we're living. But again, we are the heart of TCAR. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panel for these comments on the experience of transboundary climate risks in your national context. Now, you've identified a long list of ways that climate risks intersect with socio-political factors, with other environmental factors that may not be climate-driven, technical changes in terms of water management, dams, etc. Now, I'd like to, in the next round, ask you to reflect about how do you see transboundary climate risks fitting in with your national adaptation plans and nationally determined contributions as really kind of core documents for the climate change process in your country. And maybe we'll take the same order this time. Or you mix and match.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think that when elaborating our NDCs and our national adaptation plan, we choose the bottom-up to elaborate. So I think we was going from the local community. So we had many forum and fora to capture and receive all contribution coming from the local community that allow us maybe to have a to map and to have all contribution coming from them, the needs for adaptation also, and how we can plan for the local communities. I think that was the first thing that maybe we did when elaborating these two documents. So I just want to add maybe the effects, what is happening these last rainy season, for example, for the communities who was living around the river, Senegal River, for example. They had many rains coming from Guinea and a very huge flooding in the region of Bakel. And I think this is the picture that we see there. The picture we have here is the same one that we have in Bakel. Just after when it happens. We cannot elaborate our national plan without thinking of this kind of pictures on how we can work to reinforce the resilience of this community when talking about adaptation. So that was in the heart of our adaptation plan, and we went from this to elaborate the national adaptation plan. That is the first thing. And even with regard to the NDC, we use the same way to elaborate the NDCs. I recall I was heading one region in Senegal when we was elaborating, for example, the NDCs, and I was the one who was organizing workshops with the local population and local government to collect data from them that allows and we did it in 14 regions, the 14 regions in Senegal, and to collect all data and technique of adaptation, etc., that allow us maybe to elaborate our national adaptation plan. But what is most important is, for me, the response that we have to do is not only at the national level, but maybe at the regional level, sub-regional level also. So maybe in West Africa, if we have the ECOWAS, we can work at the ECOWAS level, and also with the African Union. So that can allow countries maybe to have bilateral collaboration to not only plan in Senegal how to manage this transboundary displacement, but to have a common planning between the Gambia and Senegal, Mauritania and Senegal, Mali and Senegal, to see how we can take, singularly each community to see how we can act to allow them maybe to be more resilient with regard of this in our local and national planning system.
Okay, thanks for those reflections, and I want to come in from this angle. Fine, currently countries are being requested to submit their revised NDC, which is called NDC 3.0. And the question is, to what extent has transboundary cascading risk has been integrated into this current revision that is currently ongoing right now? And that is why we're having this conversation. Assessing regional climate risk is huge. It involves a lot of investments. And so it is important that countries who have transboundary risk issues should come together for a robust climate risk assessment at transboundary level. And so that could be part of the document to be submitted or to be integrated into the NDC in terms of kind of regional planning, project adaptation project plans and implementation mechanisms, such that you capture all these elements that have been mentioned. Because if we don't have synergy in which countries work together to have a coherent regional climate risk assessment, it will be difficult for national governments to implement any programs that can, meet up with the expectations of transboundary risk management. So, at the level of African Group of Negotiators Expert Support, we are canvassing for support to donors or multilateral institutions that have the capacity to assist countries who have these transboundary issues, so that they can have maybe access to data that is required, or technical expertise that are required for them to do a kind of regional risk assessment, and this can now be integrated into their NDC. If that is not done, it will just be an incomplete NDC for those regional countries.
Thank you. I think beyond the concept, the way we craft it, TCAR, I think most of our countries have existing mechanism structures in place to address this. We just need to enhance, to reinforce their capacities. If I take the case of our national disaster management institutions that are out there, maybe they have not yet been prepared to address issues related like to trade. So they need that kind of capacity. If I mention just that one, Togo has some kind of cooperation with. I'm not very happy to say that, but with Japan, and Japan, instead of supporting farmers in Togo, decide to send tons of rice every year to Togo. Rice, from Japan, that the country sell, and the money they say they use it to build schools. I don't know what. How can we import? How can you take? They call it Kennedy round. Funny. So every year, minister goes there, post a picture in front of sacks of rice from Japan. Unbelievable. And that is absolutely jeopardizing the whole food system of the country. Already we have the Thai, the Indian, the rice coming. Now we have a good one that is free food, free rice. So which type of investment we want? Now that our countries are looking for fresh capitals, we have free zones being developed every day. How can we address the side effect of those investments? From a climate perspective, this is something that we need to do. We have not yet done. I was talking to the directors. They're happy to meet with some of our staff here to discuss how they can integrate. They're also looking at indicators, if we already managed to agree on some of the indicators that they can put in their NDCs. The other one is that to increase dialogue among communities. Communities are there and here, but how do we create peaceful dialogue, processes, opportunities for them? People from Ghana and Togo, very funny. So if you are elected president of Ghana, you can be sure you are not elected by only Ghana people. At some area, we all go to vote to Ghana. When they come from Togo, they all come and vote to Togo. This is very serious. It's known to everybody. Because people are the same, they just go to the farm there, so they have electoral vote from Ghana. The same people there, they have the same from Togo. So how do you maintain that kind of link that you can't stop it tomorrow? And by the way, politicians are taking advantage of that. So how do you factor those things in and make sure that we still maintain peace? The peace aspect of the TCAR, for me, is also very important. And of course, lastly, issue the transhumance aspect. I think this is something that we need to reinforce in our new NDCs and our NAPs. And finally, what we need to do is, that we should strive for, is how do we support resilience local system? How do we build a circular solidarity economy to reduce our dependence on the external factors? And there are solutions out there that work very, very well for pastoralists, for farming communities. When you take the case of agroecology, when you take the case of improved stoves, cooking systems, that reinforce capacity of communities. Thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you all for these insightful comments. It's interesting to see transhumance showing up again and again as an important issue. Now, looking beyond the the planning around the national adaptation plans and nationally determined contributions. I'd like each of you to reflect and share on some critical gaps or challenges around assessing transboundary climate risks and taking action for managing them. What kind of information do you feel you want more of from your research communities so that in the national planning documents and in the regional planning, and we're going to get to regional planning in the next phase of the discussion, you can anticipate and address these more effectively. We'll mix up the sequence again. Go ahead, Sena.
Okay, thank you. When you mentioned challenge, I was happy to start. Some are very political. Free zones, investment. You know, in the context of my country, you have a presidential unit, investment unit, not at the Ministry of Finance, but at the President's office itself. They are micromanaging almost everything in the country. And you, as a small climate change focal point, you are looking for data, who is investing where, they will not get you that information at all. So, and if you want to look at it from a climate perspective, now we have existing processes. If you want to start whichever investment, to have the environmental impact assessment, we give you the environmental document that allow you to go ahead. Sometimes you get the call from the president, give to this guy, they want to open a petrol station here, and that's it. So the political aspect is very important for me as a key challenge. The second one is, I don't think maybe it will be discussed by the second panel, but reinforcing cooperation among existing river basin authorities, Mono Basin Authority, Volta Basin Authority, Niger Basin Authority, the authority of the Senegal, etc. We need to reinforce so that from that type of cooperation we can get enough research and data for indices, and also from the researchers. What I think countries need right now is in terms of transboundary movement from animals for human. Those are very hard to get. So how do we manage to have that type of data? Is also very, very critical.
Okay, yes. I would also like to speak to some of these existing regional corporations that you have just mentioned. The problem is we have those regional corporations, but they are weak in terms of implementation of their mandates. So it is important to see how to strengthen those frameworks and see how they can facilitate, information and data sharing. Like I mentioned, risk assessment at regional level is expensive. It requires a lot of political will. But currently, most national governments are operating in silos currently. They are not abiding by the legal framework that is existing to implement or to operationalize some of these regional frameworks. Secondly, there is this problem of inadequate standardization of data collection and regional climate risk assessments. As a researcher and within the space of policy, we need evidence, credible evidence, to support our findings and the outcomes. So there was a time we were conducting a research in Senegal with University of Leeds, and that project goes for about 2 or 3 years to see how to manage migration and displacement. Because we have these issues in Senegal and its neighboring allied countries. And what we found out was that it was very difficult to track and monitor transhuman and migration and displacement. And so when we don't have a standardized methodology, it will be difficult for us to have a robust assessment that is credible, that countries could work with. So if there is any capacity building effort along that line, especially with some of our international partners, it will be helpful to see that we have good, robust arrangement in that can be integrated into NDC later. And I think I would also like to talk about the political will that you mentioned. Yeah, some of the current governance structure that you have currently needed to be strengthened. Thank you.
So, okay, thank you. So, but I think we must in Africa focus more in building on resilience in vulnerable community and promoting good practices and also supporting the adaptation measures that can help to reduce the impact of the displacement and transbound. I think the gap is we have many difficulties within countries who is sharing borders, if it is a river, either the sea and other, to have the political the exchange. I think that is where we have problem in even in Senegal, the Gambia, Mali. Everyone want to elaborate what they want to do in their own countries, instead of maybe thinking in the collaborative manner. I accept we have the OMVS, the Organisation for the Environment for Senegal. We have the hydro plant Manantali, and we have the fellow. But at the political level, how our leaders will maybe work for the local communities that trying to know that what we are going to implement in that region is only for these local people to build resilience on them, to try to solve, to put good practices on adaptation. That is where we have maybe that is where is the gap and what is needed local population. So when we talk about adaptation on local based community, so that is the way, that is where we must focus more. And I know my colleague from NDIC here, Emmanuel, they have a lot of initiative in Senegal with regard to how to help population and communities to be more resilient in promoting good adaptation practices. And I think that is what we need maybe to see how we can improve it and implement it, consolidate it with the community to make them more resilient and to make politics and to come directly to them. I think local NGOs are doing very big and very huge work at the national level. They need maybe to work more with governance. I know, Emmanuel, there's a lack of collaboration with NGOs, and this is for me, this link needs to be to see how we can work in synergy with the NGOs at the local level to allow community to be more resilient in the how can I mean with this kind of issue.
Maybe one last point. When I raised the issue about TCAR with my government, then they remember the Volta Basin Authority, the Akosobo Dam. So they say, Sena, good. So now we are going to integrate that in our NDC. But what are the financial implications? Can we now ask Ghana to pay some money back to Togo for us to address the TCAR implications? So if we find someone is investing and that's having side effect on our economy, who should pay? So what is the polluter pays principle within TCAR? How can we manage the response measures within TCAR? How can we manage the responsibility of the whomever has caused any effect on our economy and our systems, etc.? So that one I don't have the answer, but I want to throw it back to us all. What are the financial implications of the transboundary climate adaptation risk in Africa? Merci.
Thank you all very much, raising a lot of very interesting questions and issues. The question of stronger regional cooperation is clearly emerging in this. And of course, the African Union and the regional economic communities do have some existing mechanisms for cooperating around climate change. So I'd like to kind of shift the focus to that in terms of examining the roles of the AU and the regional economic communities. But also, and David, I'm going to ask you here to really change your hats to the AGNES, the expert support side of your work with negotiators. So asking you to reflect on the roles that the African Union and regional economic communities can play in assisting and working with African countries around knowledge gaps, planning, and implementation of these projects. So I think, Sene, you need to pick up right where you left off. This is well, no. This is still with you. We're getting there. It's a little bit of adaptive management, so it's in practice. So let's start with David. But you know, how do we look to the AU and the REX to take a role here?
Okay, I guess this question is for Dr. George, the team lead of the African group of negotiators, expert support. I don't know if I can wear his shoes, but then I will just make some attempt. Yeah, for regional coherence of some initiatives, we have the African Union and some regional economic communities. Like it has been mentioned, we have in West Africa, we have ECOWAS. In Central Africa, we have ECAS. In Eastern Africa, we have IGAD. These are some regional initiatives that are meant to support member states to provide technical assistance, training and capacity building programs to enhance regional capabilities in managing their transboundary risk. For example, at the African Union, we have a program called African Risk Capacity. ARC has this focus to ensure that they provide resources for countries to help them to manage their exposure and vulnerability to some of these huge risks, like for example, drought, floods, and other extreme events. And they provide insurance to assist in coping with loss and damage. And within the AGNES group, we've been trying to see how to assist some member states who have significant interest to see how they can assess some of these resources that are existing at the level of African Union. Also, in ECOWAS had a program which is called ECOWAS Standby Force, and it is involved in peacekeeping cooperations in conflict zones that have some cross-border implications, so that whatever destabilization that is existing in those countries will not cascade to other risks, either social or political tension in other countries. And they've invested so much in early warning systems and weather tracking infrastructure within West Africa. For example, AGNES works with the WASCA Research Center, which is the West African Center on Climate Change and Adapted Land Use, in the area of providing support in terms of early warning and improved weather information system for managing climate risk for agriculture, in energy, and other managing other socioeconomic impacts. So it is important that some of these existing frameworks that provide diplomatic support are strengthened. And I think this kind of a conversation is really important to see how some of these regional economic communities can come back together to have a kind of a unified fund for managing transboundary risk, or perhaps have some initiatives around shared natural resources. So if they have some funding mechanisms to manage shared natural resources, then it's easy for countries to go in there and tap resources. So it means each country must have a contribution to the regional fund that is set up, and it will assist for them to be able to meet up the mandates of these countries.
So I will be very brief because David maybe mentioned many West African maybe initiative. So maybe he missed to talk about WACA, West African climate adaptation. So I think the project is located in the Ministry of Environment in Senegal, and we have also many other initiatives and projects in Senegal with coastal erosion, and the study was including the part from in the Gambia, and we are developing some early warning system, for example, in that area. And I think what we want maybe the African Union can develop with the African capacity risk is a study from all the Atlantic side to see what will be the impact of the sea level rise in this side of the continent that can maybe allow us to have a reference to see how countries can plan adaptation on that side. I think they are the 2 points I wanted maybe to raise.
Thank you. One thing that we need to do, I think, in the issue of transboundary, it's good we find a way to package our message for politicians not to think we are coming with something big, new, very expensive. We already have the West African Free Movement Protocol that the country are suffering to implement. How do we tap into this? The existing, I'm talking about river basin organizations. How do we tap into this? There are in most of our countries. We are still defining our borders. There are bilateral border definition committees. How do we tap into this, etc., etc. So very important that we package our message so that they don't feel something very huge. So that they know that right now there are a lot of cooperation in water cooperations. That's why for me, when it comes to water resources, I think the work we are doing now, we need to find a way to work in close synergy with our colleagues of the Global Water Partnership. In a way, all those organizations that are into water resource management out there, the 97 protocol on water, etc. And the second is how do we bring our universities together? There's the WASCAL program ongoing that I think is a low-hanging fruit in which we can tap to have access to data and improve our management of the TCAR from a regional perspective.
Thank you very much. I want to go through one more quick round with you before we will open the floor for a little bit of questions. And then we will have a final speaker on the question of finance and TCARs. We are here at the COP. In addition to these pavilions and sessions, there are, in fact, the negotiations going on. In fact, that's what we're really here for. So the question is, where do you see transboundary climate risks sitting within the negotiations? Do you see this as a priority? Should it be more of a priority? How might it be supported? How might we as political and research actors support the negotiators in better placing this within the COP negotiations?
Okay, so I think it's a priority. It's not an adaptation priority, but with regard to loss and damage also is a priority. So I can talk about loss and damage because I was the one who was co-chairing the expert group on migration and displacement, and we worked a lot with the platform, the PDD on Sunday framework to elaborate maybe and identify how can we frame this under the convention with regard in the loss and damage context. And I think it is key for us to have a good taking care of this in a COP decision. So if you want maybe to elaborate project or to access to fund, so we need a COP decision who is targeting specifically the issue that can allow maybe parties and local community to elaborate project to find finance or to allow them maybe to be more resilient or on that matter. For me, I find it's a key, and then we need to focus more in the discussion and the negotiation how those items need to be inserted in the position of different group, even the African group, the LDC group, and others. They also SITs and AOCs, and to allow this to be integrated in the drafting of the COP decision on adaptation and loss and damage.
And in addition to that, for the GGA group as well, issues of crafting credible transboundary indicators is also very important, and it has been discussed extensively from the African Group of Negotiator Expert Group, Negotiation Group. There are a lot of work currently being done right now to see what are existing indicators and new indicators that can be developed that are robust to capture this cascading climate risk within the GGA group. Because it is important that once we have a credible metrics and indicators, it will be easier to attract finance, because donors want to know where would the investment be going and what will likely be indicator to track the outcomes of some of these project ideas or programs that will later come up. So like he mentioned, we want to see some of these items in the final COP decision, and so it is important that transboundary risk issues could be used to facilitate adaptation finance, especially from African context.
I think we should strive to make it become one of the cross-cutting issues in most of the topics. In response measures, you already mentioned adaptation, even GST. I think in the context of the upcoming stocktake, we need to bring this issue to the fore very, very strongly. I was just now mentioning the financial implications, compensation, reparation, just name it. How do we deal with that in the NCQG, knowing that we are all countries are going to take very strong measures? If you implement your NDC, how will it affect your next country, from north to south? So I think that this should be even within the NCQG one of the item. But I see even beyond technology, but also is the action for climate empowerment, the capacity building aspect. I think next time maybe we'll be organizing a TCAI workshop alongside with the capacity hub, the PCCB, for those who are following the capacity building negotiations. So there are some low-hanging fruit, but some we need to go look for them. NCQG, GST, but that's our next frontier, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for all these insights. Before we invite our last speaker to the stage, I'd like to open the floor for a few questions for this group. We've heard a lot, but I'm sure there are many questions in the audience. Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Todd. Allow me to thanks and congratulate the panelists for their very substantive contribution on the TICA. We should not see just the TICA with the lens of borders. It's for me beyond that. Let's look at it from the local to even the international. So when we say the local, is mean intercommunal, what people are sharing together, how they can collaborate and work. It was said already. But if we give example for coastal communities that are living in Senegal, where if you build some seawall or infrastructure in areas, it may have maladaptation elsewhere. Instead of having it in a locality, I think it will be good to work at the intercommunal level. So then we'll have a strategy, a common strategy. So localizing these transboundary issues is for me a key. Another thing is, yes, indeed, if you look at in many approaches, the TICAR is missing in terms of data and in terms of implementation. So it was said countries are working on silos. I have assessing a project. It was a multi-country project, adaptation project between Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. But the thing is, every country has its own approach. But among the countries, I mean the communities, what is the mechanism that they set up to facilitate the dialogue and the exchange among these communities? Because the main things is how we will contribute building the communities resilient. It was missing. And in the evaluation, I say, so please help communities at least as they are interacting every day to find a way to deal these issues of conflict and management of resources. And it is in this way that we should think about when we were talking about TICAD, not only political issues, but help communities to really deal with. So it was said the cascading effect of climate change. Of course, when we are talking about migration, if you look at in some countries, part of countries, where people are coming from is drylands, or their communities are really affected by droughts or the climate change effect. So definitely, it is some things that is missing in the process, and we have to bring it to help countries to deal with these climate change issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that intervention. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Just to echo Emmanuel's comments, it's been a really fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us all. I have a question just going from the very local back up to the global here at COP29. The last round of discussions were on the need to integrate transboundary climate risks into the different agenda items and negotiation tracks here. Full disclosure, I coordinate Adaptation Without Borders. So just wanted to say we've produced a brief about how we might go about that, including all the different agenda items listed here. But I have a question for you. So at COP28, we got some decision text on transboundary climate risks for the first time. It was there in parties recognise that climate risks are transboundary and cascading in nature, and that we need knowledge sharing and international cooperation to address them, both in the outcome from the first global stocktake and in the global goal on adaptation discussions. Text. It's yet to feature in the NCQG or the loss and damage discussions and so on. Next step. But in the discussions here on the global goal on adaptation, we have seen at least one party object to this language on thinking about transboundary climate risks in the context of the GGA. So I wonder if you have any suggestions on what we all need to do to really strengthen international support and cooperation on these issues over the next 12 months. We know these risks are political, we do. We know they are complex, but what could we all be doing to really create more of an enabling environment internationally to then help countries manage transboundary climate risks at the national level? That's my question.
Any takers? Well, everyone wants a piece of this.
I think I first mentioned the messaging aspect, to make it very clear, precise, make sure that it's not something very huge. It's not, we are not adding any new additional useless burden on whatever they have. So that's very important, particularly from African countries. Second is the role of research. So it's something we can let it be taken forward by universities. And then it's already been mentioned again. Let me just highlight it. How do we work with our regional commissions, ECOWAS, IGAD, ES, etc.? Working through them will be much easier than with the government. So if ECOWAS organizes a meeting or TCAR and this is addressed at that level, then it becomes something country will be happy to take up. I will just stop on those three.
Yeah, I also want to add my voice that there is need to support granular data analysis or risk assessments that are robust, because we need methodologies that are able to capture quantification of transboundary impact risk. If we are unable to provide credible evidence in terms of numbers and metrics to say this is the amount of impacts, maybe health impacts, food security, water resources, or climate security issues, we need to have a kind of support to educational institutions, research centers, perhaps rolling out a kind of call for application to support this data collection and analysis is really important so that we can have adequate data and information, and also production of more policy briefs with quantitative analysis to show that issues of transboundary climate risk is important, and it goes beyond individual party interest. Yeah.
So I think the point you raised maybe must be a bit not diplomatic but technical. So if you want maybe to get it in the negotiation process to be insert in the decision text, maybe we need to go through groups of negotiation, lead coordinators in each group to make them understand what is the issue, how important is it, that we need to integrate it in the drafting decision in the text. So that is the way that we can maybe use, if you want, to insert a point in the negotiation and also in the draft decision text. Maybe at the global level, the political, we can try to find a way. But if you want it, maybe a good taking account of this matter, we need to go through the groups. We need to go through groups and lead coordinators, maybe to allow them to catch up. Maybe we can list in the language of loss and damage if we have a decision text and we want to get it or to strengthen what already exists. So maybe we can try to see how we can insert it.
And the last point is, I think we need champions. We need to have one or two champions, right? A very TCA, very friendly NDC or NAPS. So first come up with how to integrate TCA in NDC guideline. That will be fine. Do some training and pick 1-2 countries that will be accept to champion it, that we can use as case study.
Thank you very much. I would like to, there may be more questions, but I want to shift gears now to ensure that we have ample time. There may yet be time for questions again at the end. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Cristina Rumbaitis del Rio. You can stay here if you like, or you can sit down because... Yeah. Dr. Cristina Rumbaitis del Rio is a senior advisor on adaptation and resilience for the UN Foundation. She has over 20 years of experience designing and implementing climate change adaptation initiatives with organizations such as the Rockefeller Foundation and the Global Commission on Adaptation, where she led development of impact initiatives on locally led adaptation, agriculture, food security, and other issues. So I think you've gotten a lot to chew on here. We've heard a lot about transboundary climate risks, priorities, and the needs for managing them. But this is not going to happen without finance. And we're talking not just about quantity, but about quality as well. This being the finance COP, I'd like to pose a few questions for you in your position as in a finance institution. So what opportunities do you see for channeling climate finance to addressing TCARs, and under what conditions? We'll start with that.
These are great questions, and really great to be part of the discussion. And I learned a lot from the first panel, so I really appreciate that. You know, I think this is the finance COP. I guess I have to start off by saying I'm really struck by the lack of financing for adaptation that's coming out of this COP. It is incredibly alarming that the Adaptation Fund made just a small percentage of its pledging target, missed its target for the second year in a row. And in a year when we're supposed to be getting that much closer to meeting the pledge that developed countries made to double their adaptation finance by 2025, this COP is really falling short. And so there's still time left, but really just a call to action to highlight that is part of what's going on. SEI did a really good brief around financing for transboundary risks that looked at the GCF, the Adaptation Fund, the Climate Investment Funds, SIF, to see where they are investing in transboundary, how much, and under what conditions. And what's really interesting is that there are some regional programs, but really primarily only within the Adaptation Fund, that has had the most amount of financing for regional adaptation initiatives. And there weren't any good examples of the more like non-contiguous, teleconnected types of transboundary climate risks. And so I think that tells us something. Again, that the Adaptation Fund is on the forefront of innovating and supporting the forefront of adaptation needs and what countries are expressing as their needs, whether it's locally led adaptation or innovation, or some of the regional initiatives that are needed. And the other funds are maybe in need to catch up. So that's the climate funds piece. And I guess my tagline there is there needs to be more, and there needs to be some sort of a window or something created to address the more teleconnected climate risks, the cascading risks that we know exist, but right now really doesn't have a foothold within the climate funds. The other issue is the quality of funds. Well, before I go into the quality, the other sort of category would be bilateral funding, ODA, and there's a number of countries that are financing champions for adaptation. And in a discussion the other day, I won't name any names or anything because I think it's really a common issue. These funders were saying, frankly, it's hard for us to fund this. A lot of our funding is siloed by countries. We might have a little bit of regional funding, and certainly didn't sound like anyone had funding that could do the more, complex teleconnected sorts of risks. And so that's a challenge, but at least it's a challenge that some donors are starting to recognize and see. Maybe we need to rethink how we're allocating, how we're setting up the different pockets of money and decision making around those pockets of money to address these risks. And I think, again, what was just said about educating negotiators and governments also applies to the donor governments. They need the education, the very clear communications, the evidence base on what needs to be done to help address that. So this isn't a very rosy picture, but I do think there are opportunities with the NAPs and NDCs, as was just said, to highlight this in NAPs and NDCs. And if our financing systems are truly responsive and country-driven, then they should be creating these funds and should be funding these projects. And I think there's an opportunity to reframe a bit. Again, in a conversation we had here yesterday, someone from the Asian Development Bank said, I think if we can reframe these as opportunities, it could be more attractive for financing, and then documenting the return on investment. I mean, we're talking about trade flows, we're talking about conflict, we're talking about migration, forced migration of people. We're talking about all sorts of ecological damages and losses. If we can prevent these and document that, I'm sure the benefits would be in the billions. And so I think there's a very good economic case to be made. We just need to put that forward. And I'll stop in a minute. But just to address MDBs, that was one ray of hope that I saw, at least, was that the MDBs were saying, yeah, we do have mechanisms to support this. And I think the regional development banks probably even more so, to be able to support at least multi-country and regional sorts of cooperation and knowledge exchange and the like. The challenge, though, and this gets to the quality issue, is it's often linked to loans, and the terms of those loans and concessionality are, an issue that is very pressing and concerning, as many countries are facing debt distress. So, I have ideas to go into beyond the climate funds, but we can talk about that later. Should I go into that now? Sure. Okay. So I think there's opportunities beyond the climate regime to look at funding. As we've just been hearing, this is about trade, it's about the private sector, it's about investment potential. So I think there's opportunities that we need to be exploring, again, beyond the climate convention. So this, in essence, it's about de-risking value chains and supply chains. So why isn't a Unilever involved in investing, just to pick one? I don't know why they came to mind, but just to pick an example with a company that has global supply chains. Why isn't this on their agenda? Because this is one of the major risks that they're facing, and so could they not be investing in de-risking their value chains? Another example that comes to mind is outside of the climate regime, the International Maritime Organization is discussing a levy to finance decarbonization of the sector, the shipping sector. And that levy, if it comes to fruition, which is a big if, is going to be on the order of tens of billions. It's a lot of money. Most of that money will probably be spent in the sector, and right now that's really defined as decarbonization and switching fuels and those sorts of things. But if we could expand the definition to include adaptation, could we not have funding to adapt ports and port infrastructure? So at the same time that you're building new ports and bringing in the infrastructure for new fuels, can't we do what needs to be done to make those ports more resilient? And can we develop a definition that's expansive enough to include like restoration of mangroves and ecosystems and working with communities around ports? I mean, so there's a lot of work to be done to get that in place, but I think there's an opportunity there. And, of course, that would affect the resilience of our trade routes and shipping shipping processes. So just a few examples that I've been thinking about in the past couple of days. But I think we need to be thinking beyond the climate regime because of the limitations that are there.
Thank you, Christina, for the creative thinking. I love getting out of the climate finance. We want the climate finance to come through, but that's not the only game in town. There are a lot of climate rationalities that can go in other places with some creative framing. And maybe you've touched on this a little bit already, but given the, I think, fairly vast array of different transboundary climate risks that we've been talking about today, do you see any of those as emerging clear priorities among them for, be it climate funds or otherwise? So out of all of these, which ones are going to be most attractive from an investment point of view?
Yeah, I should say that I don't sit on a climate fund, so I'm channeling from what I know. This is maybe mixed with my own opinion, but I think because of the fiscal environment that many countries are facing, the need to develop as many co-benefits as possible is going to be pretty high on the priority list. And I think, so that brings to mind, are there health outcomes that we can see that comes from addressing some of these transboundary climate risks in maybe reducing the spread of zoonotic disease or pests and and pathogens? Are there benefits to biodiversity and ecosystems that get us closer to meeting some of the targets under the Biodiversity Convention? Are there obviously in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals, broader poverty, livelihood, food security benefits that we can harness. So I think those would be some of the top ones. And then, again, this may not be such a priority, and for the climate funds, it should be. But I think peace and security, the points made about radicalism and the effect of stress and isolation on radicalism and conflict. We should by now understand these patterns and should be thinking about how can we address some of the root causes of conflict where they occur. And so I also think that's a very important angle and should be more of a priority for investment initiatives that can bring that peace and security dimension. Whether it will be or not is a bit hard for me to say.
Okay, maybe I can also add a little voice there. Under the UAE Belém work program, there is need to have some indicators to measure progress on the GGA. And this could be another opportunity for investment opportunities, looking at these transboundary risk indicators. For example, in the ongoing revised NDC 3.0, we have some different components that make up the NDC revision. So it is possible to look at, to reflect on perhaps areas where we have influence of tickers of higher priorities. For example, looking at the agriculture sector component of the NDC, we could have initiatives around collecting data, because countries submitted these indicators. And to what extent do we have granular information on these indicators at the granular scale? Because when you have indicators at the granular scale, some of them may not really, you may not really have data or information on them at the national. But the indicators are to reflect global goal on adaptation. But these countries, do they really have data sets to support these indicators that they have submitted at the local level? So it is important to work with local communities and see to what extent do we have information that can feed into those indicators to track progress. So TICAS indicators can be an entry point for investment opportunities and to be able to strengthen the agriculture component of NDC. And this could be, it could be a kind of a window to seek more funding support.
Thank you very much, and thank you, David, for raising this issue of indicators. We, in the mitigation space, obviously, we know that the indicators are hugely important to stimulating investment because you got to show that you're moving the needle. Adaptation is behind on that, but it's making good progress. But these transboundary climate risks, likewise, you can't invest and show return on things you can't measure. So I think this is a really important point taken for this field. I'd like to open the floor for a few questions from the audience for Christina or any of the panelists.
Thank you very much. I just had a terminology on quality financing. Quality. So just to understand what is that.
Who wants it?
I'm happy to start on it, but invite my colleagues here to add in. So One of the issues with adaptation finance is that so much of it is loan-based. And so it's countries' own money that they are paying interest on to adapt to challenges didn't do very much to create, hopefully reaping development gains alongside them. But we'll have to pay back with interest. And so there's really been a powerful discussion in the past few years about the quality of finance and the concessionality of terms. There are many other aspects that go beyond the sort of loans versus grants and levels of concessionality. But whether or not, for instance, it's locally led, there's a whole movement around more locally led adaptation and devolution of finance to local levels, which might be local government, or it could even get down to like grassroots and community-based finance. But I think it's important, and certainly the NCQG discussions are looking at quality as well as quantity. But I think it's important that we don't trade one for the other. That we don't trade more finance for lower quality finance, and I worry about that sometimes happening here. But let me let colleagues. I don't know if anyone wants to add.
Well, I think she said it, but this week, NCQG is among the 14 topics that were sent to second week, and I just read the letter from the president asking ministers who were appointed to facilitate the NCQG discussion to look at the qualitative aspect. So that's what we are at now. So not the quantitative. So which money from who's going to pay, what the contributor base, who's going to handle it, etc. So that's the quality aspect. That's what we are discussing the whole week. As to the quantum, wait for Australia probably if you are lucky enough.
I forgot is access, and the ease of access is also a key issue, which is coming up in NCQG as well, because we've seen time horizons of years to access GCF funding, and I was working in Afghanistan in a previous role. I remember the Minister of Environment saying, I did the math, and they were able to access some readiness finance, a couple million. They said at this rate, and it took well over a year to access that finance, said at this rate, by the time we get our adaptation needs met by the GCF, we'll be well underwater. And Afghanistan is not very close to the coast. It just sticks in my mind because maybe things are improving, but let's not forget the difficulties in actually accessing finance.
I have another question back here.
Hello, my name is Sonja Köppel. I'm working in the Water Convention. Actually, the long name is Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Water Courses and International Lakes. So it's exactly about transboundary cooperation, particularly on shared waters, which makes up 60% of freshwater resources worldwide. Actually, we have been arguing for transboundary cooperation and adaptation since 2006, when a specific task force on water and climate was created under the Water Convention, which has prepared, under the leadership of Netherlands and now Switzerland, and it has prepared guidance material, organized many global workshops to exchange experience, also regional capacity building activities, and also pilot projects in specific basin to actually implement transboundary adaptation actions. And indeed, arguing for the topic with some actors like some who are here today, I think finally we are seeing this going forward a bit. But it's not yet reflected in NDC and NAPS. We just made an analysis of NDCs and NAPS, and where we can see that in NAPS is already a bit better, like maybe 15-20% mention transboundary somewhere. In NDCs, it's less than like 2% or so. So we hope that going forward this figure will improve, and we actually just launched a paper on this on Saturday here, which is called Mainstreaming Transboundary Cooperation into NDCs and NAPS, and that was also welcomed and presented to our our conference of the parties, which took place a few weeks ago in Slovenia with almost 100 countries at that moment. So, and that gives some specific suggestions of how actually transboundary cooperation on adaptation and also mitigation can happen. And some good practices from a few countries worldwide, including in Africa, where I think there are actually several good practices. But now coming to the topics you mentioned here, regarding firstly the indicator discussion, and including under GGA, I think it's a very valid point that it would be good to reflect this somehow given that it's included in the UE Bellenberg program in the target somewhere, the transboundary part. So actually we, as part of UN Water, we made in the submission regarding water, we proposed some transboundary elements for the indicator discussions. And this is based on the results which we have being a co-custodian agency at global level for the SDG indicator 6.5.2. So this is the only indicator among the Sustainable Development Goals which actually covers transboundary cooperation. It measures the progress of, in this case, transboundary water cooperation worldwide. And this year we just finalized the third reporting exercise where 153 countries worldwide have, no, not 153, 129, but still quite a good amount, have provided information on the status of their transboundary cooperation. And in this specific report from this time, we have a special focus on climate change and flood and drought. So the report actually gives specific figures based on those 129 replies of how many countries, and in this case specific, for example, basins are dealing at transboundary level with flood and drought, and for example have transboundary adaptation strategies. And there again, the number is for flood it's already much better, for drought worse, and for climate change only 15% have actually transboundary adaptation strategy. So again, this shows the need for more action. I think some colleagues, like including Robert, have actually contributed to this exercise. And I think that given that this data is available and countries already report on transboundary aspects, including with regard to climate change, this could be taken into account and feed into the GGA indicator discussions happening here and which will be finalized next year. So that's my first point. And finally, with regards to finance and investment, I mean, I think the adaptation fund, which finances transboundary project, is already a good example. But indeed, in December last year, we organized in Geneva a workshop on financing transboundary cooperation. And as you say, I mean, this is not yet a topic so high on the agenda because of the different reasons mentioned here. And the second day we had specifically dedicated to, but on the other hand, we can also really see benefits of financing transboundary projects and activities. Exactly, peace and security benefits, as you say, also regional integration. Benefits for agriculture, for energy, like in the Senegal Basin, etc., of the shared infrastructure on the Senegal Basin. And the second day of that workshop was also focused on private sector and transboundary cooperation. And indeed, they don't. This is not yet considered as a high priority. However. Slowly, maybe the topic is getting up on their agenda, and for example, we suggested input on the topic of transboundary for the CDK questionnaire, which goes to thousands of companies worldwide, and where they report on the sustainability of their investments, and where now already majority of companies report at least on water. So going forward, I hope that also more companies will consider, so to say, the transboundary dimension of their investments. But that remains to be seen in the future rounds of reporting. So just some small steps into the direction we're talking of here today.
Thanks so much. I hope to get your contact so we can find that paper that you just launched. That sounds very spot on for us. Other questions or comments from the audience for the panel? Final parting shots from the panel, I think.
Well, I just wanted to pick up on my colleague's here point on the UAE Belém work program and the indicators and the point that was just made and the question that Katie raised earlier about how do we ensure that transboundary stays in the indicator set that is eventually agreed. And my one worry is, like, I think there's a brilliant opportunity within the dimensional targets that are there, specifically around vulnerability and risk analysis, to try and include something that really checks and sees our transboundary climate risks included in risk analysis to really drive that. The challenge is I'm not sure that indicator already exists, and right now what's been the process has been to look at the indicators that exist, and as we heard, there's only one on transboundary water within the SDGs, which has been, I'm sure, picked up into the Excel spreadsheet of 10,000 or so indicators that have been compiled. But what about new indicators? And you know, we shouldn't hold ourselves just to the indicators that we have when there are new issues that aren't fully reflected in those. So I think there will need to be a push in this next 6 months or so to say, hey, we need some new indicators that might incentivize and look at transboundary risks more explicitly. And so I think that's a take-home activity that many of us can maybe push on from our respective points of leverage.
Okay, thanks very much. For me, I will encourage ODI and some other institutions and partners to see how to create a kind of a dialogue workshop among member countries that have transboundary risk, to have a common front and approach to address some of these issues of transboundary risk and see how they can be integrated in terms of, one, looking for investment opportunities to address this risk, and also to get these as part of the incoming decisions that will be in the UNFCCC framework for future investments.
Well, I think we have said it all. We are on the right track. I don't think we can get more than what we are having now. People are well intentioned. My mom told me if you ask 200 people to get you a wife, you'll die single. So if you bring 200 countries together to agree on 300 topics, you can't expect more. But at least the good thing is we are together. Multilateralism is still winning. We don't want G7, G20 to take up this topic. We want it to be here where China speaks, Canada speaks, and Lesotho say I disagree. And like I said, we need more of a cooperation. I started saying we need to reach out to groups like the Water Convention and other water communities, water resource management communities, and start from the ground, start from the dialogue, the communities, and what we can do with mayors. There's a lot happening. There are a lot of cross-country municipality partnership that are already out there. If we look at the board aspect, how can we look for those champions, those great case studies? And finally, I'll be working with young people from the past 20 years. Let's reinforce education capacity building. Asante sana. Merci beaucoup.
So for my last word is first to thank to maybe put this thematic, which is very, very interesting. So my main area of negotiation is loss and damage, and then I was initially also in adaptation. I was member of the adaptation fund board. I see that maybe we have many more to do in the negotiation process. So if we want to take account all these matters within the adaptation fund board, was member, there is maybe 2 years ago, member of the Adaptation Fund. And I know parties, when they are elaborating project, this matter is not not really take account within the project they need to develop and submit to the Adaptation Fund. So maybe we need to be more aggressive in the thematic that party can understand and know exactly what is happening with regard to transboundary displacement and migration, to integrate it more in the national planning on loss and damage, and maybe to submit for project financing. And I know maybe the issue and the matter in Senegal is very large. If we can have maybe a small scale project that can go to the that we can duplicate at the national level, even the regional level, to capture more funds under the GCF, and also the new fund for loss and damage coming. I think that is my fight in loss and damage. In the beginning, I was discussing and negotiating on loss and damage, and that will be again, maybe in the few years, I'm still in the negotiation that we can. And I think if we, at the local level, we are making planning, we can integrate it, because in Senegal we include displacement and migration in the national planning at the local level, the local government. But I think we can insist in the transboundary migration. That will be very key to allow local government maybe to see how we can invest more in protecting population. For me, it's not only over countries at the international when I'm thinking transboundary migration, but it is at the national level that is more implicated, more population, more vulnerable people who is migrating, displacing, even the young who is with the family, the farmers, when they are not getting education, for example, see how they can make a national regulation that can allow them everywhere where they stay, they can go to school. That is very interesting and very important that we need maybe to focus more. I really thank you so much to allow me maybe to join this panel of discussion. I'm very happy to join.
Thank you very much for those final insights. I'm charged with the very difficult duty of summarizing an extremely rich and ranging panel. Not only is this the transboundary issue, we've raised a lot of cross-scalar questions, from local capacities to manage conflict, to looking at teleconnections and international trade and international agreements to manage, conceive, and address the complex connections between climate impacts in one place and downstream experiences in others, not necessarily even in immediate boundaries. There was a lot raised about capacity strengthening, again, for even local social institutions, for national governments, and indeed for a lot of donor institutions as well. I think that was a welcome insight. Integrating transboundary climate risks into NAPs and NDCs. We're seeing it starting to happen, but I think we've identified a large scope for strengthening that. I very much appreciated the emphasis toward the end on indicators, that if we don't have indicators around this, then it's going to be difficult to stimulate and support investment in it. The challenges, of course, associated with adding indicators through the UAE Belém statements are there, and of course, what is an agreeable indicator that goes across a lot of different parties. I appreciated, Christina, your comments at the end about the importance of emphasizing co-benefits, that we can't just focus on single issue or single element analyses, but look for co-benefits with health, co-benefits with social equity and SDGs, biodiversity, peace and security. If we can help package these creatively and frame the issue creatively, that will attract more attention and more investment and more meaningful engagement with this. And also looking beyond climate finance, that there's a lot of inherent motivation for private sector actors to engage this if we frame it correctly. This is the close of the session, but certainly not the end of the issue. I think this conversation will be continuing a lot, and I think the take-home on our homework for the next 6 months to think about how to do this correctly. I think we can look forward to more discussions about this at the substa meetings in Bonn, and I hopefully in the interim between right now and the substa meetings in Bonn, so we really show up there prepared. I would like to thank very much our panel for joining us and all of you in the audience for staying with us through this rich conversation this morning.